And now for something completely different. We're going to be fixing a PlayStation 5 HDMI port. We've been getting a surplus of Xbox and PlayStation consoles in for HDMI port repair, so I figured it's probably worth filming how we actually do these repairs. So one of my technicians has already done me the favor and pulled this motherboard out of the PS5, so you don't have to see all of the boring parts of the teardown. If that's something you're interested in viewing, I'm sure there's hundreds, if not thousands, of YouTube videos on how to disassemble a PlayStation 5, but I do recommend checking out ifixit.com just to get a more detailed step-by-step of how to properly disassemble a PlayStation 5 based off of the model number that you have. But today we're just going to focus on HDMI port replacement. So, how do we do HDMI port repair? Preparation is key. And what we have here is a board preheater. This is, I can never pronounce it, but it's a PUI, P-U-H-U-I. Either that's a T or that's a J, but it's an 8280. And this is essentially going to heat the ambient temperature of the motherboard here to 200 degrees Celsius. This is going to allow the entire motherboard here to be at a constant 200 degrees Celsius so that we don't have to use as much heat for an extended amount of time to remove the HDMI port. You can do the repair without a board heater. It is significantly more difficult, but it is not impossible. But today, to make our life easier, we're going to be using this board preheater. So let's go ahead and move into it. I have already set everything up here to where the board heater is already at 200 degrees Celsius and the HDMI is lined up to where it needs to be removed. So let's go ahead and get our microscope in view so you guys can see what we're working with here. And so the damage of the port, you can actually kind of see up here at the top. There's a little bit of a crack. I'm not going to pull the board out because it's 200 degrees Celsius right now, but it's also pushed back right here to where the HDMI port is just split. So what we need to do now is we're going to use some flux and go ahead and put some flux around the pins, the back pins and the standoff pins. And we're going to take our rework station that we have here. It's just our fancy hot air machine. Let's crank it all the way up and make sure that we have our big nozzle attached. We're just going to work around in a circle here. And the whole point of this is to melt the standoff solders. The actual pin solder is not as difficult to remove as the standoff, because the standoff goes into ground. And if you've watched my previous videos, I've explained that ground is basically like a heatsink. It's the largest area on the circuit board that dissipates heat. That's not its sole purpose. Its sole purpose is to ground out electronics, but it also doubles as a heatsink. So the problem when you're heating up anything that is connected to ground is that it's going to dissipate the heat while you're also heating it up. So it takes a lot longer to heat up anything such as standoffs connected to ground than it would like a 1 volt line, a 5 volt line, something where there's a tiny piece of copper that's connected to a data line or a power line, as opposed to the copper that is ground. So that's my little rant. Greetings from Cuba. Hello, thanks for joining us today. So this part always takes a while, and you can see that the plastic is actually beginning to melt, and down there in the bottom left it looks like some of the solder is starting to melt, so we should be able to get our tweezers and lift right up. So here's our old HDMI. You can see it's actually cracked right there and kind of split. So let's set that to the side because it's still steaming, a little smoky, and let's clean up our standoff holes. And for that, we're going to need some wick. I personally like using Goot wick. It was recommended by Rossman Group and Jessa Jones, and I've just been using it ever since. Let's get a couple of pieces of this prepped. So I'm going to cut like 4 pieces of Goot wick. A busy day today. We were quiet until we started streaming. So that's the trick. All right, so I got 4 pieces of goot wick set aside. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the rework station as well as our soldering station. So we're going to be using a lot of heat here. So I'm going to grab a normal soldering iron and we're just going to touch the standoff. And it's going to pull up some of the solder. And we're going to use the rework station to finish pulling the rest of it through the standoff hole. So just like that. And I just kind of threw that to the side. Let's do the same thing to the right side. Same as before, heat gun as well as soldering iron. Go back and forth, really heating up this area. And it's just kind of wicking up, as the name entails, or soldering or sucking up the solder. There we go. Let me grab my tweezers and pick this up the rest of the way. So we actually only needed 2 pieces of our goot wick here instead of 4, but we're going to end up using that anyways in future repairs. Now, let's clean up the area. For that, Q-tips and some 99% isopropyl alcohol. Hello everyone, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining. And let's get back to the microscope camera here. And so this stuff is just, since I heated it up, it's tacky, it's thick. It's almost like a tree sap or syrup the longer you heat it up. So we want to remove this before we apply new flux and new solder. If you wanted to take it a step extra, you could also wick up the pads right here. Sorry, the whole entire thing moved. You could wick up the actual pads where the pins on the HDMI port go and put some new solder. Those mounds look pretty good. They don't look damaged or compromised. They don't look too oxidized, so I think we can just reuse them. And we will apply more solder if we need to after we have the new HDMI in place. Also, another key thing that I forgot to mention here is with the HDMI port, as I'm zooming in right here, that tiny little resistor is, or it's a capacitor, I forget exactly what it is, but it's a tiny component directly behind the HDMI port. This guy is very easy to knock off whenever you're doing the HDMI removal, because think about it, you're heating everything up, so this component is also loose. The solder is melted. It's very easy when you lift up the HDMI port that's going to come along with it, and if that is missing, the HDMI port will not work. I forget exactly what that particular component is, but there's plenty of forums online of the specs of it and where to purchase it, but try your absolute best to not remove or damage that part. Sometimes it's out of your control, and from the initial damage of someone shoving an HDMI or maybe dropping the PlayStation or Xbox, that HDMI will push into that component and knock it off anyways, and you have to end up replacing it. Fortunately, it's intact here, so we don't have to worry about replacing it. So that's just a little tidbit I wanted to go over with everyone. So now, let's go ahead and apply some more flux. Flux has been applied. Let's shift this over. It's hot, very, very hot. And then of course, we need our new HDMI port in the packaging. The camera's in a different angle and it's much higher up, so this is new for me as it is for you guys. So now with the new HDMI, let's go ahead and put it in place. And so I'm just lining up the pins here with the actual pads. And I'm making sure that my preheater bar right here is not affecting the HDMI, and I think it is a little bit. So I am going to lift up the board just a tiny bit. Or the whole thing. Sure, why not? Let's just work with this. Time out. Time out. All right. All right, and let's get this back in view for you. Whew. Burned myself just a little bit, but nothing a little bit of mustard can't fix. Take away the burn. Always keep a bottle of mustard if you're doing board repair or anything with hot tools. Surprisingly, the turmeric, I believe, in the mustard actually does a really good job numbing the pain. Random tip. I work with smartphones. Good wick is the best for desoldering, and boards less thick. I only use the soldering iron. I agree. It's great. All right. Now that we have our pins lined up with our pads, we're going to go ahead and begin heating this up. And we really just want surface tension to grab the pins and pull them into the pads. So we're going to keep going around in a circle. And I can see that some of my flux is beginning to just kind of dry up. Let's go ahead and put a little bit more down there. Kind of goes side to side, but not too close to where we start melting the plastic of our new HDMI, because then we have to end up replacing it again. And now I can see some of the pads are beginning to melt. They don't look like they're really grabbing, and I think that's because some of my flux, some of my flux just kind of evaporated away. So let's do this again, and we can see some of the pins have now been pulled into the pads. There we are. The surface tension's just kind of pulling it. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bead of solder and push it into the standoff. You can see it just kind of turned into a bead and pulled it through. So we got that one leg right here replaced. Do the same thing over here. Oh. Sometimes when you do a bead, it'll actually turn into a ball. And we want that ball, no, to not go underneath. Awesome. That wasn't supposed to happen, but let's see if we can work with this. I haven't had that one happen before. The bead of solder went underneath a pad or a pin here. So let's see if we can just kind of suck that up. And we can. So what I did is I just took our soldering pencil and I was able to touch that ball, and it came up. Awesome. Let's get back into putting our standoffs down. Yep, you can see that's trying to fight me here. There are better methods for doing this, I'm sure. This is just the method I choose to do. Just because it's the way I do doesn't mean it's always the right way. Okay, so that went down into that hole. Yeah, you can see every time I try to hit this with the soldering iron, it just, I'm sorry, with the rework station, it just kind of blows away. Try that again. We don't want to get too close. There we are. Turn into a little ball. Go in your hole. Are you too good for your home? As Billy Madison would say. No, not Billy Madison. I'm sorry. Happy Gilmore would say. It's practically the same movies. Just kidding. All right. So we now have 2 out of 4 of our legs going back into the standoffs. So before I get the last 2, I'm really just going to use that as like a tacking point to hold the HDMI port in place. And I'm going to push down on the HDMI until I see those pins go into the pads. And I'm going to have to touch that up with the soldering iron itself. So let's leave that alone to kind of cool off. Looks great. It looks crooked from your guys' position only because the actual microscope is tilted slightly, but from what I can see, it is on top. The pins are on top of the pads perfectly. Okay, now comes the point of where we cheat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the soldering iron as well as the solder, and I'm going to touch the side up here. Still in focus? Yep. And touch the side of the HDMI port as I'm pushing a bead of solder into the hole here. This is another method you can do for getting solder through the standoff hole. Less likely for the solder balls to blow away, but if they ever do, I showed you a good way on how to put them back. And truthfully, before we continue any further, I do want to clean up a little bit of the flux here, because as I've shown before, the longer you expose the flux to heat, it starts to get a sappy, tacky, like texture, and not so much malleable for moving the solder and soldering iron around. I hope that makes sense. I don't think he sees the chat. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm trying a different method of the camera placement because I reworked my solder station over here to where it's not so distracting with all the movement of work in the background. So it is kind of hard to pay attention to the camera, look at the, make sure I'm in view of the camera, and then also look at the chat. But thank you for joining. I always appreciate your guys' feedback and comments. Okay, so we have our standoff soldered. Now what we want to do is we want to, I don't know why it looks so crooked for your guys' point of view. From my point of view, it looks fine. Now what we really want to do is get the pins on top of the pads. The interesting thing though is from my point of view, and it could be this type of HDMI, I can see that the HDMI, this is the board, this is the HDMI, and it's kind of tilting forward. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat this all back up with some new flux, and I'm going to push down with the tweezers until I can actually bend it back so it's parallel, not crooked, but parallel with the motherboard. So let's do that. Let's go ahead, put a lot more flux. It's fresh, clean flux. Oh. Oh no. We blew our surge protector. That's a first. Huh? Yeah, we have a television, a rework station, this board heater, and the soldering station all connected to the surge outlet, so looks like we were just pulling too much wattage. Okay, camera's back on. That's also a first. I've never had that happen before. Alright, so back to what I was saying. We really want the HDMI to lay parallel to the motherboard and kind of fall back in place. Trying to keep my distance is to prevent myself from melting the plastic of the HDMI. Killed the microscope? I did. Killed the microscope camera. That has never happened before, so that's funny. We'll do it live. Alright, so my standoffs have been liquefied. So now we just need to get the actual HDMI to lay. Go down a little bit. I'm just waiting for the pads to solidify and kind of cool down. All right. So now we can go and touch up those pins with our micro pencil, because we are just going to have to add a little bit more solder. And the HDMI is parallel. I just went ahead and looked at it from the side. So it looks like that the pins from this manufacturer are bent slightly. But we're going to fix that. So what I'm going to do, just so I don't burn myself, is I'm now going to get an extra pair of gloves, double up, just to kind of avoid some of the heat from the motherboard. Looks good. But how's the inside of the port? The port still looks fine from what I could see on the side. We'll take a look at the inside of the port when we're done with the pins, and we'll test it out too. Another thing I like to do is I get this rubber mat here, but we want to avoid touching the liquid metal. We're not going to use the mat, never mind. We're going to turn off the preheater because we actually don't need it anymore. Now, let's go ahead and turn on our micro pencil without touching the board and burning ourselves. Yep, that's exactly what happened here. Is it looks like these pins are actually just bent upwards. So when you do this repair, you normally won't have this problem. Yeah. Interesting to see how everyone has different ways of changing HDMI ports. It's true. There's so many different ways. There's not really an industry standard. Yeah, I can see this whole entire thing is bent. I actually don't like it personally. I feel like this one's gonna come back for an RMA. All right. We're going to remove it. I don't like this HDMI port personally. I feel like if we roll with this HDMI is just going to come back. And it's because the actual pins on the HDMI are bent. So, the nice thing is that our solder is leaded solder, so it melts at a lower temperature than that of the factory. So this is going to come up a lot faster than the original port did. See? Look at that. Look how easy that was. It was almost too easy. Let's take a better look at this real quick to see where the problem is. Yeah. I can actually see that the pins are bent, like all the pins are bent. And I really don't like that, and I don't want this coming back and we end up doing the repair twice. So let's get it done correctly the first time. Fair play, mate, for admitting it and wanting to correct it. It's just, I don't like doing repairs twice and only getting paid once for it personally. Alright, let's inspect this port. This one looks straight. Awesome. We're going to use this port. Let's clean up the mess that we have here. Because as I mentioned, flux starts to get tacky once it oxidizes and heats up more. Let's take it a step further, actually. Let's use a little bit of acetone here. Acetone tends to do a pretty good job at cleaning up flux. Alright, so now you're going to see the method of when we get to save our solder. Because our solder, in my opinion, is better than the factory solder, so there's no point of wicking it up. Let's go ahead and get new flux in place. So get this in focus for you guys. Which thermal camera do you recommend? I've been using the Keonly. I don't know the exact model, but I've been using it at this point since 2018, 2019. But it was an $800 camera at the time. There are better cameras that are cheaper now on the market. I just don't know what to recommend because this one is still working and I haven't needed to look for another one. All right, new HDMI. Only ever used isopropyl alcohol. Yep, you can totally just use 100% acetone. This is the stuff that we actually just get from Walmart. This is the Equate brand, but just 100% non-scented, just nail polish remover. It's usually in the cosmetic or beauty section. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna heat this area up until we start to see some of it melt. Wow, that's expensive, not heard of it. Uh-oh, what's going on now? YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. All right, we gotta finish this repair before the computer starts to act up. Everything is playing nice today. All right. So I got my standoffs beginning to melt. Now I just need to actually hold it in place. Come on. Lost my grip. Let me readjust. Come on. Side to side without melting anything. And what I'm doing is I'm just heating the left side standoff as well as the right side, just one at a time, until the port starts to go in. And we're almost there. Come on. Almost. Trying my best not to melt the port in the process. And it's not going down all the way, so let's see what's going on here. Before, a little bit of flux. Again, side to side. But yeah, Keonly, they make a lot of tools. I might even be pronouncing that name wrong entirely. They make a lot of iPhone board repair tools. This is not wanting to go down all the way. Interesting. It's not, this one's not that it's crooked, it's almost like the standoffs are bent and they're not wanting to go down all the way. This is an HDMI port from Injured Gadgets. I've actually never used theirs before. The other one was from Mobile Centrics. Let's see, I'm using a razor blade just to give me more surface area for pushing down on. Probably not the smartest thing since it's a blade. But yeah. It's almost like it is stuck up. Okay. I have a few Keonly tools. Yeah, and I might be saying that name wrong. Okay, I readjusted the bar for the HDMI, or for the board heater, just in case the standoffs were getting stuck. I doubt that was the issue, but it was just strange that the whole entire thing wasn't wanting to go down. There we go. We're actually moving now, so I'm not sure what that was about, but now everything's a little crooked. Yeah, all the pins are crooked. What is that about? Why is this HDMI so different? Okay, that's what we want. Now everything's more aligned. Yeah, I really don't know what happened there. But you can see some of the pins are slightly crooked than the other ones. Yeah, the right side looks good. The left side, I don't like that. Let's see if we can readjust that. And the whole entire camera moved too. That's a little bit more in focus. So, a few things we have here, which I'm happy that this happens. That way I can kind of show how to work with it. We do have some melted plastic. So I'm just taking a scalpel here and just removing some of it. We can see these pins on the right side look lined up. These pins on the left are a little crooked. Yeah, they're not even soldered on there. And it's just these first 5. And sometimes you'll get that with these HDMIs, but these pins are actually touching the board. So I'm not sure what was going on with that last Mobile Centrics HDMI. Mobile Centrics doesn't make the HDMI, they just import them from China. So that one just could have been a dud, truthfully. But this Injured Gadgets one just looks like some of the pins are slightly crooked. So we're gonna go ahead and use our micro pencil and just adjust them to make them more in line with the pads. Almost looks like the left side is lifted, not skewed. Let's take another look just to make sure, because the right side is touching the left side. Let's make sure that everything is properly aligned. Yeah. No, this one's just messed up. Cool. All right. We're not going to use this HDMI either. Okay. it looks like that the standoffs on this HDMI were bow-legged and sticking out. So when I was pushing them down, I actually bent the HDMI. So not a fan of that. I've never had that happen before with my previous HDMIs. Like I said, I've never used the Injured Gadgets one. Not bashing Injured Gadgets, in no way is that what I'm intending to do here. It just looks like this one particular HDMI that I got from them was slightly bow-legged. So the HDMI did not want to go back down. Alright, let's just lift this one up again. Get another HDMI. This is why you always keep more than just one component, just in case something strange like this happens. Oh yeah, that's exactly what's going on, because now that I've melted my solder, even that was kind of giving me a weird tug. Yeah, and I can actually see it now, just kind of lifting it up, that the pins, they're not straight, they're actually going out a little bit. So that's unfortunate. We'll give Injured Gadgets another shot. We'll get some more HDMIs in from them and see if that's a consistent issue or if that was just like a weird one-time fluke. Is the plastic melting? It was on that one because I was heating it up longer than I felt comfortable with. So the sad reality is we have more HDMIs coming in today, but they're not here yet. So I'm going to see if I can get this Mobile Centrics one working. Because I don't want to end the stream with an unsuccessful HDMI port repair until the other pins show up. So what we're going to do, a little trick I've done before, is we're going to take a flathead. We're going to push those pins down. You guys are learning all the tricks today. All right. So without much pressure, I'm just going to lightly push down because it just looks like these pins were bent up. Alright, this looks much better. And third time's a try, a charm. Third try is a charm. Don't drop your HDMI. Alright, just getting it lined up on my long tweezers here that are bent. I actually bent them some to act as a hook to grip them, to grip the components, in this case the HDMI. Zoom out a little bit actually. Alright, and like before, we're just heating up. If you remember, I did turn off my preheater, so it did drastically drop the temperature. So it is just going to take a little bit longer. Actually, not as long as I was anticipating, but a little bit longer just to heat up the standoffs. Left side is heating up, right side is melting. Alright, let's try to get this in gently, no force. There we are. Right side's going in, left side, and give a second. Perfect. Much better. Okay, now without holding it or applying any pressure. See, that one went down just fine because the standoffs weren't bow leg. And the pins are actually touching the pads because we use the flathead screwdriver to push the pins down. Do you use solder paste for the pads? For which pads? I'm sorry. The memory? Or the SSDs? Because those do have like thermal pads on them. And truthfully, they seem to still hold themselves up pretty well when we remove them. We just put them back on. Really, the main thing I'm the most concerned about when working on PS5s is the liquid metal. Just try my best to make sure that we don't touch it. If we do touch it, then we have to replace it. Yeah, these pads look so much better after we bent them. So, before, let's see if I can zoom in. How hot do you need the board to be? Could you check the temp with a thermal camera? We use a board preheater at 200 degrees Celsius, and it has its own built-in thermometer, so we know what temperature the board is at. Currently it's at 130. I actually don't need it anymore, so I'm going to turn it down. So now we can actually see the pins are actually touching the pads after we bent them. So cool. Alright, now we did a lot of sidetrack there. Let's go ahead and clean up the pins one more time. That way we can use our micro pencil and start soldering the pads. And like I said earlier, I actually do enjoy when random little hiccups happen on live streams, because it's going to be the reality of what happens when you're doing these repairs in the real world, in actual practice. So you get to see how to fix random little hiccups, bad HDMIs, maybe misaligned pins, maybe just poor technique. So it never bothers me when stuff like that happens. Like Bob Ross says, we don't make mistakes, we make happy accidents. And it's just a happy accident of teaching you guys what to do in a situation like this. Because I will admit, I'm too busy to actually read my YouTube comments. Most of them are just asking for advice. And I apologize, I actually don't respond to those. Mostly because I just don't see them. It's not that I'm intentionally ignoring, it's just I don't see them. So I like when stuff like this messes up. So if it happens to you, I can kind of show you in this quick video. I'll check and see how long this video has been going for. Anyways, I was going to say I could show you in this video that is no longer quick how to properly fix mistakes. Do you pre-tin the pins on the port? I do if the pins are looking rough. These pins are salvageable. And what I mean by rough is like they're not all equally the same height. Maybe some of the solder came up with the old charge port or HDMI port. So this one we're going to skip the tinning, but we are going to touch it up anyways with some solder and our micro pencil. So let's turn on our soldering station. I use solder paste 183 or 200 for the pads and the boards, and little in the pins and the ports, type C for better melting and less temperature. Oh, solder paste instead of solder. Yeah, and I've seen that method before too, where people use the solder paste instead. We have solder paste, but I only use it for reballing ICs and VGAs. Alright, pin 2 is going to be just a little tricky. Let's see if I can zoom in a little more for you guys. So pin 2 is not connected to a line. It's connected to ground. It requires more temperature or a longer exposure to the iron for heating up. And this is zoomed in at 40, at a times 40, so my hands are shaking because this is very small. go. It's starting to grab it. Okay. Pin 3. It's going to be a lot easier because it's an actual pad that goes to either a power line or a data line. Most HDMI pins are data lines. There are power lines, but there we go. See, that one went on much easier than the ground pad. Number 5 is a ground pad as well. I can tell just because there's no via or trace. That's the word I was looking for earlier, trace that's coming off of it. So we're just gonna keep the iron on here for a minute. There we go, it's actually grabbing it. 6, no problem. Same thing with 7. 7's the data line, it looks like. 8 is ground. Hopefully you guys can see this. The flux is browning and kind of reflecting off the microscope camera, so it is a little harder to see. You could choose to leave your board heater on at this point just for making ground easier to melt with your micro pencil. I tend to burn myself when I do that. Right. So that's why I have it turned off right now. Come on. Right. And after this ground connection, I'm going to clean it again, because the flux is actually making it a little bit difficult to see. I'm also standing up for this repair instead of being in my chair, so I'm just shaking a lot. Okay, let's go ahead, get to a checkpoint here, clean up our flux, and then do it again. Thank you for the 10 people that are concurrently viewing. I hope that this content is interesting. It's like I mentioned, we're just trying to do different videos on here. Logic board repairs in MacBooks are just getting progressively more difficult and less repairable. So those I don't really like recording as much because sometimes I can't fix them. And people want a working board. People want a working board repair video too. I do have, I think, a 1998 that has a bad CD3215 that I'm gonna have to replace today. I may do a live stream on that. That one is a confirmed bad CD3215. So those aren't as, those are more successful repairs than those that are just like not powering on after a little bit of liquid damage. Love the content. You repair laptops. You repair MacBooks specifically. That's our specialty, is Apple product repair. We just have so many customers that bring in HDMI ports on their video game consoles that we offer that as a service too, since we have all the equipment. Let's evaporate some of the alcohol we got there. You can also just put a little bit more solder on those pads. See, now that the flux is removed, we can really see what everything looks like, and it's not the best. and we want this to be really good so it doesn't come back. Because everyone wants their PlayStation working, rightfully so. Soldering station put itself to sleep. That would help if we turn it back on. Yeah, it's making things much easier. So what I just did is I went ahead and used the heat gun just to kind of heat up the ground area to make things easier for us for touching up the ground pins, because as you saw, they do take a lot more time and more heat. So if we go ahead and just kind of preheat them with our rework station, then we can just get solder on there very quickly. And you see now that the gold pins are becoming more silver because the solder is actually grabbing onto it. Alright, 4 more pins to go. And we're going to clean it up and take a look at it. These are always tricky ones right here because of this component. A little hard to get in there. And one more. Cool. Awesome. So you can see a giant ball just grabbed that last the last 2 pins. So let's go ahead and wick that up, because that's probably going to happen with you. What I'm going to use before I actually wick is I'm going to use a giant soldering iron, or a normal soldering iron in comparison to the pencil. And it's got a little cup in it, and it doubles as a wick. Okay, so I got the majority of that up, but we can see that those last 2 pins are still bridged. So if you remember, we had 4 pieces of wick and we only used 2 of them. So let's grab a piece of wick. And we're gonna try to suck that up without grabbing the component below it. Okay, we've got some of the solder up. Let's see if we can grab more. Okay. Right. Still have some solder there. Let's go ahead and heat it up with the rework station a little bit. And while that's warm, let's touch it with the pencil. Surface tension's bringing the solder back. And I can still see from my angle that those two pads are still bridged. Put a little bit more solder there. This is a very tricky spot to get solder out of. It's not impossible, it's just tricky. Alright, I think I got it. How do we confirm? Multimeter. Get a multimeter, put it in continuity mode. That's going to be the sound wave. If yours doesn't have continuity mode, use the omega symbol for ohms, and we're going to measure the two pins together and see if they beep, which is what our continuity mode does. And they are not beeping. They beeped when I just slipped, but they're not beeping. How do you check with the ohms? You want to make sure that this says OL and not 0. Never mind. It's not that you want to see OL. You just want to make sure you don't see 0. I'm getting 4,000 ohms, or 4 kiloohms. If this was bridged still through that solder, that little solder bridge that we had there, it would have been 0. 0 resistance. So, we are good. Let's give it a quick little wiggle test. And that's just simply getting a very thin, sharp, pointy object, tweezers, in this case a scalpel, and we're touching the pins. And we're just seeing if any of them wiggle. Looks perfect, thank you. Nice work, hate cleaning those bridges, thank you. So, one by one. Making sure none of the pins move. I'm going to put some more solder on that pin, the first pin, then we're going to clean it up and take a look at our work. Because if you remember, when I was first putting it on there, it looked bad. It looked unprofessional. It looked like it was going to come back in a week or two. We don't want that. We want to do it right. We want to do it clean, professional, and make sure that we don't have any warranty repairs. Because I don't like doing this repair more than once. And I've done it 3 times now on this one. Okay. Give it one more cleaning. Combination of isopropyl alcohol and acetone. That's what I like to use personally. 99% alcohol if possible. Stay away from the 70%. That is the typical isopropyl alcohol you will find in the what would it be? Like the first aid section of your department store. Typically where Band-Aids and lidocaine and other types of quick remedies are located. Because if you think about it, 70% alcohol, what's the other 30%? It's water. It's diluted water. So that stuff is better for cleaning out wounds and cuts than 99%. 99% tends to evaporate faster than it can actually disinfect, from my understanding. But it's great for electronics because electronics do not like water. They're very much like cats. Alright, so I think that looks pretty good. The 2 pins on the right, they look a little suspicious. But if we do the wiggle test, they are not moving. If we wanted to be extra, which I kind of want to, I do want to touch up this one pin just a little bit more. This is my way. You guys may think it may not be the right way. This is just the way that I like to do it. Perfect. See if I can try that pin again without bridging. That one is good. Well recovered, thank you. And remember, this was the first HDMI port we tried that the pins were bent, so using the flathead screwdriver method of bending it back down allowed us to salvage this HDMI port. Clean up the area around. Don't like leaving flux in because since it's tacky, flux is great for absorbing dust. And PlayStations, I'm sure, as you're very well aware, get dusty. Not just PlayStations, but all video game consoles. Maybe not the Nintendo Switch, but Xboxes and PlayStations are great at absorbing dust. They're vacuum cleaners, they pull in cool air. Alright, last thing we're looking at is just the underside. We want to make sure that we have some nice mounds. And I think we're good. I don't think we actually need to touch this up at all, but we do need to clean it. Not right or wrong way, it's the end results that matters. Thank you. And so this stuff we never cleaned while we were in the process of doing this repair. So you can see it's really, really tacky. And alcohol is really good at getting the still semi, not as thick, I want to say liquidy, semi-liquidy flux, and the acetone does a much better job in picking up the thicker, more tacky, more viscous flux. Alright, and then of course we want to look inside of the port just to make sure nothing is damaged. So let's pull this out to the edge. And that looks pretty good if I'd say so myself. So we're good here. Let's turn this off. Now, let's put it together haphazardly just to show that it's working. And then I'll end up putting the rest of this back together. But that I'm going to do off camera. The actual putting together, just to show you guys I'm not swapping this out with another already repaired motherboard. I'm just going to fix it right here on my side bench. Danny, do you mind handing me the big portion of the PlayStation? The part with the heatsink. Sweet, thank you. One thing one of my employees was telling me is that it's recommended to remove the coin cell battery so you don't accidentally short anything out when you're doing this repair. So she went ahead and did that for me before giving the board to me. So let's put this in. Make sure you put it back in. It's what keeps track of the time, the clock. Let's see. So I'm not going to fully put this together. I'm just connecting it to the power supply, just so I can then connect it to HDMI and show you that this works. And then we'll finish putting the rest back together. Always make sure your HDMI repair was successful before you start putting everything back together. There are many things in the repair industry that make a man want to take a smoke break, and putting a device back together just to find out you have to take it back apart kind of constitute that. Not that I smoke, but you understand where I'm coming from. see, where is the cable? Excuse me. Let's actually connect it through our capture camera. Capture card, capture USB. Do you touch up the liquid metal when you do the port repairs? Only if I actually touch the liquid metal and we've left like an obvious hole. This one, it looks pretty good for the most part. I'm going to leave that at the discretion of one of my employees to decide if we're going to replace the liquid metal or not. I don't think we need to, but I'll let them decide. All right. I'm going to turn this off up here. Okay. HDMI is connected, front plate is connected. Let's check and see if this is repairable. What would this be? This would be the overhead camera. Nope, it's the microscope camera technically. All right. So let's see if that fixed it. That's what we want to see. And then another thing we'll do is a wiggle test. Just actually wiggle the HDMI port back and forth and see if the image cuts out. I'm also forcing the processor down onto the heatsink because there is no retention bracket. We just want to see that this actually turns on. But that's it. That's a successful motherboard HDMI port repair with a couple of hiccups along the way that you may or may not experience when you do this repair. And we were able to show what a good HDMI and a bad HDMI can do during this repair. So I hope this has been informative. I'm going to go ahead and finish closing this up. Let me change the screen real quick so you guys don't accidentally see what customer information may or may not be on here. But I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you've learned something. And if this is a repair that you'd like us to do, you're welcome to mail in your device to us at iRevive.com/mail-in. But yeah. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great one. Bye.